Well, 4 months from now, U.S. voters will go to the polls in crucial midterm elections that could reshape the final 2 years of the Trump presidency. In Congress, the Democratic Party is hoping to take control of the House of Representatives, but the topic of Israel and its war in Gaza is becoming one of the Democratic Party's biggest fault lines. DW's Ines Pohl traveled across the country to meet the people at the heart of the divide and ask whether the party can hold itself together.
For decades, support for Israel was one of the few issues that united Democrats. Today, it has become one of the party's deepest political fault lines.
Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal, the architect of a horrific genocide against the Palestinian people.
I will always ensure Israel has the ability to defend itself.
Those two voices capture a struggle reshaping one of America's two major political parties. The war in Gaza accelerated a shift that had already begun. What started as a foreign policy debate has become a question about the Democratic Party's future.
When people just saw the human toll of what was happening in the Middle East, you saw a lot of people start to shift. I also think that Israel has become very closely identified with the Republican Party and with the Trump administration. So you're seeing more pushback from Democrats now beginning to question some of their strategy and approach for what's happened in Gaza.
The shift didn't happen overnight. Years of growing criticism of Israeli government policies were amplified by the war in Gaza. What was once a bipartisan consensus has become one of the biggest generational divides inside the Democratic Party. Support for Israel has fallen sharply among Democratic voters, especially among younger Americans. That shift is increasingly reflected in Washington. For the first time, nearly half of House Democrats voted to block this year's military aid package to Israel.
Partyless, politically homeless, abandoned. I would say those are pretty accurate descriptions.
Rachel has been a Democrat her entire life. She asked us to not reveal her identity and even alter her voice. She fears speaking publicly about Israel could cost her her job.
I had a very uncomfortable moment about 2 weeks ago on the metro riding to work with my Star of David very visible and a Free Palestine plastered younger person sat opposite corner to me, and I just felt the weight, eyes boring into me. The things that I used to just walk around comfortably wearing or demonstrating Judaism, more and more I don't feel comfortable. And at the same time, I don't want to back down because I am proud of my Judaism.
Around probably 4 years ago, Israel was bipartisan. That wasn't the case anymore. And now it's getting very extreme. And there are fractions within the Democratic Party that are strictly anti-Israel.
I think that there are real questions about the way that the Jewish people are talked about, certainly. But I think that people are trying to, make distinctions between you can oppose Israel but not be anti-Semitic. So I think some of it is in the details, but certainly there is a lot of anti-Semitic discourse online. You see that in some of the far right. You see it from some of the far left.
For many younger Democrats, the war in Gaza has fundamentally changed how they see Israel and what they expect from their party. We joined a protest in Los Angeles, California.
I'm Jewish American and grew up in a household where I was told that sort of Israel would protect Jewish people, and I've seen this not to be the case. It means a lot to me to be coming out here and demanding that people recognize Palestinians' rights and the crimes that have been committed against Palestinians by Israel and backed by the U.S.
I've always voted Democratic except the last election. I couldn't vote for Kamala Harris. I didn't vote for anybody. I voted uncommitted. It's the first time in my life that I couldn't vote. I think I lost my home too, because they were supporting a genocide.
Just across the street, a small group has come to defend Israel.
The Democratic Party has to, number one, make it very clear that anti-Semitism is not okay. Already, many people in the Democratic Party and in the Republican Party both are normalizing anti-Semitism.
As the discussion continues, emotions rise.
You guys are terror. Only that, just terror flags. Every one of us is a terrorist flag.
You are holding a sign, who needs Israel? Do you think Israel has the right to exist?
Do you think the United States has the right to exist? Do you think Germany has the right to exist? What does right to exist mean, Ines? What do you mean when you say right to exist? What does that mean? Does a genocidal state like Israel have a right to exist?
The debate reaches the Democratic leadership.
Without question, the alliance is at a crossroads. The most important thing a friend can do is to tell truth to a friend. The Prime Minister and his government have led Israel into a dead end.
Inside the party, another debate is unfolding.
The base of the Democratic Party became adamant that we needed to break our alliance with Israel, but the majority of the party elected officials, whose elections are bolstered largely by money arrayed against the wishes of the base in terms of policy, they will not break with money that is very heavily still connected to support for Israel. How do you get to a majority in Congress?
The next question being, can Democrats remain a coalition that houses the viewpoints of both Rachel and the protesters we met in Los Angeles?
I think what's uniting the Democratic Party the most right now going into the midterm elections is President Trump. And so while some people may say that they may not vote for a Democratic candidate, I think ultimately the motivation to have a backlash against Trump is what's motivating voters more than anything.
But that's not a long-term solution.
No, I think it's one that the party is continuing to wrestle with. And I think we've certainly seen more candidates that are opposed to Israel aid winning, but the Israel lobby is still a very powerful one, even among Democratic and Republican politics. So I think that this election cycle is could really reshape the Congress.
For decades, Israel helped unite Democrats. Today, it is testing what kind of party they want to become.
Well, joining me now is Sarah Yerkes. She's a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment and a former State Department official who worked on Israeli-Palestinian affairs. Sarah, it's good to have you with us to discuss what the debate over Gaza is revealing about the Democratic Party. So let me ask you, is it exposing divisions within the Democratic Party, or is it creating new ones?
It's really accelerating existing divisions. These divisions have existed for quite some time, but the Gaza war, the way the Israeli government has handled the Gaza war and U.S. support thereof has really kind of sped up what were already existing cracks within the party.
And what is shifting or driving this shift most? Is it the war itself or changing political values among younger Democrats?
It's a combination of things. Certainly these debates are being led by the younger group within the party. You were seeing the younger groups who are really embracing the progressive candidates more. But it's also a broader issue about military fatigue, about the economy. One thing that is uniting the party right now is actually the party is very much against the Iran war. And so you're seeing it's not just about Israel per se, it's about broader issues that the progressive wing of the party has adopted.
Can a political party, can it still hold together when parts of its base feel politically homeless on the same issue?
I think one of the things that's interesting is that there are parts of the party on both sides that feel, as you said, homeless within the party. And what we're seeing is this shift, between the party leadership and the party base, between the older generation, between the younger generation. And all of this, leads to a series of divisions. And I think we can see this play out most clearly in the recent vote where we saw, the majority leader, the minority leader, but the head of the Democratic Party, Hakeem Jeffries, who basically said he's not going to try to convince the member of his party to vote along one line. Mm-hmm. So he's recognizing this division, and rather than trying to connect people, he's kind of letting them voice their own views on this, which just shows how divided the party really is.
Yeah. How significant is it that anti-establishment voices on Israel are now winning Democratic primaries?
It's quite important, but I think there has to be one big caveat that we need to remember about all this, which is that in general, Americans don't vote on foreign policy. So what we're seeing play out at a sort of more micro level at these primaries at the local level are not necessarily going to translate at the national level. The other important piece of this is the connection of Netanyahu himself and the Israeli government to Donald Trump. So it's very easy for these more progressive candidates to kind of show, if you vote for someone who's in bed with Israel, you're voting for Trump. That can play out again at the local level. But at the end of the day, the Democratic Party needs to remember that it's a party for the American people, not for the Israeli people, not for the Palestinian people. And it's going to need to be able to deliver on the economy, on housing, education, all these issues that are what Americans actually go to the polls for.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you, how much of this debate is about Israel and how much is about identity and values in America?
I think a lot of it it's much broader than Israel. I mean, it is really about this idea of support for marginalized people, about the growing economic divide within the United States. There's also an anti-Semitic element to this. The Trump administration has unleashed these waves of anti-Semitism that we haven't seen in decades in this country. And so, Israel is kind of where this is all playing out, but it's a much bigger issue than just Israel.
Speaking of anti-Semitism, can Democrats draw a clear line between criticism of Israel and anti-Semitism?
I think this has been very difficult for the party. I honestly don't think they've done a great job so far at doing this. There is a real serious argument to be made about rejection of support for Israel, about rejection of unfettered U.S. military support for Israel. But that has often bled into rhetoric that is very much against the right of Israel to exist as a state, the right of a Jewish state to exist, which we don't see playing out, when it comes to other groups and to other states. And so the party has really struggled with how do you balance this? And this is where, we've seen the Trump administration really kind of double down. It's been sort of harmful to the Democratic Party in some ways.
And has this debate, has it contributed to this feeling? I mean, we hear it now all the time that the Democratic Party has lost touch with its working class base in the United States.
I think that is accurate to say. And again, I think it's not just about Israel. It's about marginalization in general. It's about, the Palestinian people represent a community of marginalized people that have not been given the same rights, have not been given the same access, and now have suffered under this military conflict. But at the same time, it's really about what happens at home. And in the United States, we have seen this real push from the young wing of the Democratic Party to try to adopt more equality, more equitable housing policy, education, welfare policies that the party had originally was sort of built on and has kind of gotten away from over the past several years.
So 4 months before voters head to the polls, let me ask you, are Democratic voters, are they now further from their elected leaders on Israel than at any point in recent memory?
I would say parts of the party are, but others, we have seen a shift within the party itself. The top leadership of the party is very slowly shifting, but there are large swaths of the Democratic Party, within Congress and others that have really, shared the same views as much of the base. And there are other parts of the base that very much reject this shift as well. So I think it's still an open question at this point.
Sarah Yerkes, it's always good to have you on the program. Good to get your analysis, Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you.